Welcome to I Saw the TV Show, Dread Central's Pride Month 3-part video series inspired by Jane Shoenbrun's queer horror fantasia I Saw the TV Glow from Studio A24.
In the film, a teenage boy named Owen is just trying to make it through life in the suburbs when his classmate introduces him to a mysterious late-night TV show, the Pink Opaque. It's a vision of a supernatural world beneath their own. In the pale glow of the television, Owen's view of reality begins to crack.
Over 3 weeks this Pride Month, the three of us are going to team up to discuss our own versions of the Pink Opaque, the life-altering teen genre shows that we were obsessed with as young queer kids in the 90s and the 2000s, decades that were even more isolating and dangerous for queer kids.
So each week we are going to be sharing our personal relationship with a horror TV series that changed our young queer lives. And we're going to do, with the series, we're also going to unpack the escapism, monstrous allegories, and social isolation that shaped us all creatively. I'm sure most of you have read our stuff. We are all very queer and very weird and very creative, so we're very excited to be here to talk about our Pink Opaques. And then each episode of I Saw the TV Show will also accompany a personal essay on our website, so please make sure to check out that essay linked below. But before we jump in, let's do some very quick introductions so everyone is familiar. I am Beth McAndrews, Editor-in-Cheif of Dread Central, and I'm going to pass on to Josh Korngut.
Yeah, I'm Josh Korngut. I'm the managing editor of Dread Central, but I'm also the host of Development Hell podcast here on the Dread Central Podcast Network, where we cover unmade horror films. Please subscribe. You don't have to listen, just subscribe.
And I am Chad Collins, and I'm a staff writer here at Dread Central.
And for this episode, I am very excited personally. I won't speak for Chad, because we are diving into Josh Korngut, our managing editor's pick this week. Hello, Josh. Tell us everything about your pick.
Okay, so I just have to start by saying that I wasn't sure how I was going to respond to I Saw the TV Glow, and it changed my life. It ruined me. It made me better. It made me worse. I'm so obsessed with this movie, and you guys saw it before I did, and loved it, and I should have taken that as a good sign.
Well, you and I have sometimes very different types of movies that we like, and so I wasn't sure, but because of what I think you picked and what is inspiration for Shoenbrun's film, I think really is a reason why you resonated so well with it.
I think so too, yeah. I didn't resonate as much with their first film, but after seeing I Saw the TV Glow, I think it may have something more to do with just resources, because when they had more to work with, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. So you don't need to have seen the movie to enjoy what we're about to do, but I couldn't recommend it more. I have a feeling it will be in my at least my top 5 of the year, probably. So, right. So I think, as Chad mentioned earlier, in the movie, the main character is dealing with this very liminal, cerebral 90s kids show called the Pink Opaque, which, is a mishmash of everything that you and I grew up on as millennials in the 90s. And so my version of this, and I was hooning and hawing about it because it just seemed too obvious, but at the end of the day, sometimes you have to go with what is most, obvious. So I went with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I have reasons for this. It is probably the most important show to me ever, which is such showing my age as an elder gay millennial, but it's true. This show changed my life. I saw it for the first time, I believe, in the first or second grade, and it disrupted my worldview. First of all, it introduced me to horror, and anyone watching this knows that the three of us work on a horror website. We are horror freaks, and so it was my introduction to horror in general, but it was also my introduction to my fascination with identifying with a strong female character. I identify as a guy, not as trans or non-binary, but I've always had this spiritual, connection with really strong or eccentric girl characters in pop culture, and I think that's
Is that
kind of
why you're friends with me?
spearheaded.
I'm just kidding.
I mean, no. Um, yeah. So yeah, the two most important elements of the show for me were A, like it like ushering me into horror, and B, it like kind of ushering me into like gay culture in a way as well, because it's a stereotype, like gays so often sort of get assigned their gay sort of icon women. It happens in pop music a lot, but it also happens in pop culture. And Buffy is just one of them for me. I think as a kid, it was because, usually this archetype of the blonde girl in the 90s is she's susceptible, she's at risk, she's going to die, she is a slut, she's like all of these two-dimensional basic things. And then we get Buffy and we get to like truly subvert that and see her as like a human being. And that just like my little like 10-year-old mind couldn't comprehend that.
Did you
And
watch it on cable or like what the Canadian
yeah,
equivalent to
yes.
whatever y'all had? Okay.
So I did watch it on cable up here in Canada. But I like my world was truly rocked and changed the year that we could finally start getting them on DVD. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you remember that? Like, and like, so I'd get like one season of it on DVD like every Christmas. But like at the time, that would like last you a year. Like that was
That's
crazy.
like when Owen gets the tapes from her. When she gives
Oh,
him the
yes.
recorded tapes because he can't watch it, it's on too late, and he gets the tapes, like that beauty of that, like this is like very academic, but haptic slash being able to touch that and like have it in your
Yeah,
hands is so life
huge.
altering as like a fan, especially like when you're such a big fan as a young age, like being able to touch it. I'm like getting goosebumps thinking about
It makes you
art.
more
Yeah,
connected to it. It
it
it makes you,
does.
yeah, it brings you closer to it. Right now, in the age of streaming, when everything is so accessible, it just feels even more further away because it's always there. You kind of take it for granted.
Oh
And at the
yeah.
time, you couldn't do that. Like when we recorded episodes of Sailor Moon on VHS when I was a kid, I was like, this is precious cargo. It must be protected.
And
Um,
whoever threw away all my VHS tapes, I'm coming for you.
I have a question for you guys before I get into the specifics of my episode.
Mhm.
I know you're not necessarily like huge fans of it, but from where you're sitting, like, how did it infiltrate your zeitgeist as a kid, or did it? Um, I'm actually more specifically interested in Chad because I kind of knew Mary Beth.
So I was not introduced to Buffy until I was much older.
Mhm.
Um, and thinking about like the tactility and just like availability of media at the time, I grew up in a big Irish Catholic family. So at any given point, there were 7 of us in that house, including my
Oh,
parents. And we had one television. So anything that was, airing on cable or on, any network television, it had to be something that everybody was watching because otherwise there just wasn't time for everyone to have like their own sort of access to the TV. So a lot of my media consumption was predicated around what is everybody going to like and everybody going to watch. So I was a huge Powerpuff Girls stan growing up because that was just one of those shows that we all agreed on. So Buffy wasn't one of the ones we watched. And
mhm.
it wasn't until I was older and getting comfortable with, my own identity and then also hearing about Buffy all the time that I was like, I need to see what this is all about. And I don't remember specifically when, but it was one of the first times it was available to stream. I was
Mhm.
like, I have to finally watch this show because it's one of those like formative pieces of media that I just haven't seen. And I loved it. It was great, but I think it definitely landed a little bit differently, not having grown up with it.
For sure. So one of the most interesting like aspects of I Saw the TV Glow was how the main character is so like rattled and affected by some of the monsters when he's younger, but then when he revisits it when he's older, sort of and able to see it for what it truly is, it's a kid's show. It's doesn't
That
hold up and it's real.
that
And
part broke my heart a little bit.
it
I
broke my
feel like
heart too. It did
just because that
break my heart too.
experience is hard when you're an adult. Anyway.
But I also think at the same time, and I'll talk about it with my episode today, when you when when I was so affected by a specific episode by a specific show, as an adult, it's still imprinted on me. So I still find the episode that I'm going to talk about today like one of the most horrifying like pieces of horror media in the entire world. And I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it's like truly what it looked like with the ice cream monster at the end of TV Glow. But for me, it like changed my life. So maybe this is an okay time for me to sort of tell you guys a little bit about the episode I picked.
Yes, I would love to hear. Now that you're framing it as the scariest thing, I want to hear about it.
Yeah, and like our job here, all the three of us, is not necessarily to pick the scariest thing, but for me, I kind of did. Season 2 of Buffy was when it was really starting to get good, and they were doing like a lot of good through line stuff. But by the end of the season, there was a truly standalone Freak of the Week episode where Buffy gets sick and is sent to the hospital, where it becomes clear that there's this like invisible boogeyman who's feeding on sort of young kids with a fever. So young children are the only people that can see him. He looks like suspiciously a lot like Freddy Krueger. He's got the top hat and the long fingers, and he's like really freaky, and like he's in a dark suit. It kind of gives what's it called where you like you can't move and you see a scary monster when you're sleeping.
Oh, like sleep
Paralysis.
paralysis?
Yeah, it's giving that to some degree. So Buffy's in the hospital, and because she's a 17-year-old, she's like sort of between an adult and a kid, so she's able to see it. And the kids, yeah, need to sort of turn to her for help because, you know, of course, the adults don't believe them. And the episode is just her sort of stalking through the hospital and trying to defeat this invisible ghoul, this boogeyman archetype. And it's wild. It's like definitely I'm certain for 1997 this was like
it looks good though.
pretty
I looked at
scary
the image.
stuff.
It's really good practical work.
How would you describe his name is Der Kinderstod is the name of the monster, which is German for child death, which I love. And the episode is actually called Killed by Death, which I think they could have done better, but how would you describe the monster?
He's got like it's definitely some Freddy Krueger inspiration here, but he's all black and he looks like a beast because the teeth, his lower teeth are going over his lips, so he looks like more of like a creature in that regard rather than a dude. So it's like you look at it like from far away, he's incredibly unassuming, and then you look closer at his face, and that would scare the shit out of me as a kid.
Honestly, it was from far away that scared me. Like there's a moment where she wakes up and it's like 3 a.m. and she's looking out the hallway of like her hospital room, and he just kind of like walks by. And I remember as a kid being like, well, I'm ruined, I'm dead, this is the end of my life. So I loved it, and I still love it to this day. I think, you know, one of the reasons for that is I was saying earlier, Buffy disrupted my worldview, you know, for giving me horror, for giving me strong women. This was the first time in my life where I was given the impression that children are not like immortal, that children could be hurt, that, you know, someone like me who was like the same age as those kids, you know, could die. You know, the children dying was a big theme of the episode, and I don't think my little brain was ready for that. Like it just had never crossed my mind at the time. And so
this was like what you watched. You hadn't like really read Goosebumps or anything. Like you hadn't really been as confronted with. I guess visually it's different sometimes.
You know, I'd done Are You Afraid of the Dark, where like sometimes there were unhappy endings, but it wasn't ever as explicit as this. And like it was explicit. Like the way that he gets you is he like holds you down. There's some assault illusions for sure. I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but he like holds you down, he gets on top of you. His eyeballs come out of their sockets and they like connect to your forehead and suck the life out of you.
Ew.
Yeah. I suggest looking into it.
Well, and you love, and that's so funny because you love Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy. So that's very funny that this is also the Buffy episode you picked.
I do. You know what? I'm obsessed with the boogeyman archetype in general. I love him.
Do you think it started with this?
For sure. 100%.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's weird.
Neat.
I also
I'm actually curious. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, I want to hear what you have to say.
I'm also curious though, like specifically as a young queer kid, like how this episode and Buffy in general, like I know you talked about identifying with strong female characters, but like does this episode have anything kind of like affecting you as a queer kid, or maybe like made you think about your queerness at all, even subconsciously?
Oh, like 100%
Okay.
for sure. You know, in the episode, like the people that are at risk, again, they're kids, but it always kind of gave me that sense of like, you know, as an outsider, you're in danger. Like people don't listen to you. People
Yeah.
don't like you're almost invisible yourself too, in a way. And so that always kind of resonated with me with this episode, with these kids that like nobody, you know, really paid much mind to. And there's like these adults that are running the ship, but they don't care. So,
That's cool to
Buffy,
have Buffy as
yeah,
a bridge between the kids and the adults. I like how they play with that's really
they
cool. As
did,
again, like
yeah.
I've never watched an episode of Buffy, I'm so sorry. But I like the way that they play with that.
I mean, you know what? At the time, I like definitely saw her as an adult, but 17-year-olds are children, right?
Yeah,
Like
I know.
they're little babies,
Yes,
little
they are
little
tiny children.
babies.
I know. It's so
Um,
funny how we see 17 as adulthood when you're a kid watching these shows. And
for
then you're
sure.
watching them now, you're like, that's a child. That's a
I know.
child.
At the same time, like 25-year-old Sarah Michelle Gellar, you know, was
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
what she was, but um yeah, I think honestly, when it comes to queerness and Buffy, it is a little bit less about this episode and more about the show in general, which is just about
Yeah.
celebrating the underdog and celebrating, you know, a group of ragtag losers that come together and then together discover what their personal power is. You know, like one of them is, you know, uses her like hacker computer skills to like as a sort of superpower, and eventually that transgresses into magic and witchcraft, and one of them turns into a werewolf, which is very boy puberty coded, and everybody kind of has a special ability, and that kind of stems from their otherness. And I, you know, as a gay person, I like to think that, you know, my queerness does make me special in a way, in good ways, and I guess ways that put me at risk. But yeah, that's how queerness and Buffy resonated for me, for sure.
Hell yeah. And I mean, and Buffy itself is pretty queer too, explicitly in some parts, correct?
For sure. I mean, I think
We
it
don't
was
have to
one of
talk
the
about. I know it's like
first.
spoilers and stuff, but I know that they it has a
I think we can
relationship,
spoil Buffy.
right?
Yeah, by
Yeah.
season 4, there's like a full-blown lesbian romance between two main characters.
Love
So
that.
that's gorge. Thanks, Buffy.
Thanks, Buffy.
Um, yeah. So I guess the last kind of stuff I want to touch base on for this episode is like the idea of isolation, because in TV Glow, the characters like get lost in the world of their show. It becomes less of a like a protector of them, and in some ways becomes, you know, their crutch for escaping reality, and it can be dangerous for them. So uh I do think that I suffered from that as a kid. I think being, you know, I'm now 35. I skipped or I missed, you know, the generation that was like purely online all the time. Like I did get a little bit of outdoor
Yeah.
energy, and I think that was lucky. But yeah, I did escape into TV. I did escape into movies. I think horror was a big part of that for me.
Yeah.
As a like a super anxious kid, and I'm still an anxious adult, there's something about like teaming up with what's scary that feels kind of protective. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because you kind of know, or you'll be protected if you're friends with the scary thing and it won't hurt you.
Literally 100% that. Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I
So
get that for sure.
yeah, the scariest part in this fucking episode, and I really hope you play it, is there's just the scene where she wakes up with a vision at 3 in the morning and he walks by spookily in the hallway. Please play that here. Um, yeah. So my like Blue Opaque, definitely Buffy episode Killed by Death. I think it's season 2, like episode 18 or something, if you guys want to check it out.
Cool. Well,
Yeah,
Josh, thank you for sharing your personal Pink Opaque with
thank you.
Buffy. On next week's episode of I Saw the TV Show, it is our final episode, and it is my episode where we are talking about Courage the Cowardly Dog. So get very excited for that, everybody. But thank you, Josh, for sharing, and thank you, Chad, for joining me. And tune in next week for the third and final episode of I Saw the TV Show.
Crazy.